Welcome to Echoes of the Unknown, the podcast where we explore some of the world's most fascinating unsolved mysteries. I'm Jack Montgomery, and today we're traveling back to 1944 in Los Angeles. The city was filled with wartime uniforms, nightclub music, and Hollywood glamour. But behind the polished facades and shimmering lights, something far darker was waiting. That October, Georgette Bauerdorf, a young oil heiress, was found dead in the bathtub of her West Hollywood apartment. More than 80 years later, her killer has never been identified. In the 1940s, Los Angeles was a different kind of city than it had been a decade earlier. World War II transformed it. Servicemen flooded the streets. People arrived from everywhere and disappeared just as quickly. The city pulsed with motion, and with that motion came opportunity, anonymity, and risk. Georgette Bauerdorf was born in New York City in 1924, the daughter of George Bauerdorf, an Illinois oil executive, and his wife Constance. After her father's death in 1937, Georgette inherited a substantial fortune from her family's oil interests. After her mother died in 1942, Georgette relocated from the Midwest to Los Angeles, where she began a new life as a wealthy young socialite, surrounded by comfort and connections. In August of 1944, the 20-year-old oil heiress moved into a fashionable two-story apartment at the El Palacio Apartments, located at 8493 Fountain Avenue in West Hollywood. It was the sort of place meant to feel secluded and upscale. Spanish-style charm on the outside, quiet stairs and private rooms inside. Despite her wealth, Georgette chose not to live quietly in privilege. She volunteered her time at the Hollywood Canteen, the famous club where young women, actresses, secretaries, and socialites alike, spent long evenings dancing with servicemen who might ship out to combat the next morning. The Canteen wasn't a typical nightclub. It was patriotic, tightly organized, and designed as a morale boost for troops heading overseas. Rank-and-file enlisted men could dance, watch live performances, request songs from big bands, and even meet their favorite Hollywood movie stars, like Betty Davis and Rita Hayworth. It helped create the illusion, if only for a night, that everything was going to be okay. Georgette was known for being social, someone who liked meeting people, making plans, filling her calendar. Friends later described her as especially generous with servicemen, sometimes lending a hand in ways that made others worry she trusted too easily. In early October 1944, Georgette seemed upbeat. She had cashed a check for $175 and purchased a plane ticket to El Paso, Texas, telling friends she planned a rendezvous with a soldier boyfriend. It sounded like the kind of romantic wartime story you'd expect in Los Angeles at the time, brief, intense, and wrapped in uncertainty. Then came the night of October 11th into the early hours of October 12th. According to accounts given at the time, Georgette finished her shift at the Hollywood Canteen and later spent time at the Palladium, one of the city's popular dance venues. Sometime after that, she drove toward home. On that drive, she picked up a hitchhiking Army sergeant named Gordon Adlin, who had also been at the Palladium. He later stated that she invited him up to her apartment. He said they talked and drank, and that he left her apartment later that night. Adlin claimed Georgette was alive when he departed. There's no public record showing that he was ever formally named as a primary suspect, and authorities ultimately announced that he had been cleared. Later that morning, the silence surrounding Georgette became impossible to ignore. Her cleaning woman, Lulu Atwood, arrived at the apartment. What she found immediately felt wrong. The front door was open, and inside there was no response, but she could hear something. the steady sound of water coming from upstairs. Lulu climbed the stairs to the second-floor bathroom, where she found a horrifying scene. There in the bathtub, she found Georgette's body. She was partially submerged. The water was still running, or had been running long enough to fill and overflow, turning the scene into something both grotesque and unnervingly deliberate. Lulu immediately alerted the apartment manager, and police were called within minutes. At first, investigators considered whether it could have been an accident, a slip, a fall, a drowning. But the autopsy ended that idea quickly. Georgette had injuries consistent with a violent struggle, and the autopsy indicated she had been the victim of a sexual assault. Her death was attributed to asphyxiation, described in reporting as a rag or bandage forced into her throat. And investigators noted something especially strange about that material. It was characterized as an unusual European-issue medical bandage, not something easily explained as coming from Georgette's household. The apartment itself offered a chilling kind of ambiguity. There was no obvious smashed window, no door kicked in, no clear sign of forced entry that could simplify the narrative into a stranger having broken in. Instead, the scene suggested either access, opportunity, or deception. Then investigators noticed a detail that made the case feel even more calculated. The automatic light outside Georgette's apartment unit, the kind meant to flick on when someone approached, wasn't working. When an officer checked it, the bulb had been carefully unscrewed just enough that it would not activate. In other words, someone had made sure the entryway would be dark. That single detail reframed the crime. Darkness was not accidental, it was arranged. In the kitchen, investigators noted evidence that Georgette had likely been alone and moving through her routine. A snack, string beans, and melon appeared to have been eaten not long before the attack. A maintenance man below the unit later described hearing heels and then a loud crash around midnight, followed by quiet. Another neighbor reported hearing a scream around roughly 2:30 a.m., then nothing. The timeline was messy, but the impression was consistent. Georgette returned home, moved through the apartment, and at some point, perhaps after she went upstairs, someone confronted her. Robbery did not look like the main objective. It's true that approximately $100 was missing from Georgette's purse, and her car, a 1936 Oldsmobile coupe registered in her sister's name, was gone. But valuables remained. Jewelry, cash, and other expensive property were not systematically taken, the way a true burglary would suggest. Her car was later located abandoned, out of gas, roughly a dozen miles away, near San Pedro Street and East 25th Street. The displacement mattered. If the killer took the car, he didn't keep it. He used it to escape, then discarded it. And then there were the fingerprints. Investigators found prints on the light bulb and elsewhere, but they could not match them. In 1944, even good fingerprints were only as useful as the files you could compare them to. If the killer had no criminal record, or if his prints weren't captured in a usable way, those smudges became just another ghost detail in an already haunted case. The investigation widened quickly because it almost had to. Georgette's volunteer job at the Hollywood Canteen meant she had met many servicemen. Wartime Los Angeles meant men came and went. Some were in town for a night, some were shipped out. Some never returned. Detectives questioned and cleared suspects as best they could, but the suspect pool was enormous and constantly changing. Over the years, there were many theories: an intruder hiding inside the apartment, someone with a pass key, someone she trusted, someone she barely knew, someone who watched her routine and waited for the right moment. Each theory fits parts of the evidence and leaves other parts unexplained. And then, 3 years later, Los Angeles would be transfixed by a different unsolved case, the 1947 murder of Elizabeth Short, the woman the press would call the Black Dahlia. It's important to be careful here because this is where myth can start to crowd out fact. Some writers have pointed to parallels between the Bauerdorf case and the Black Dahlia murder, not as proof, but as a chilling possibility. Both victims were young women in Los Angeles. Both cases involved a degree of staging, and in both cases, investigators and the public were left staring at a crime scene that felt less like chaos and more like design. But direct links remain speculative. Even basic claims, such as whether Elizabeth Short ever worked at the Hollywood Canteen, are disputed. So what matters in Georgette's case is not forcing a connection, but recognizing why the comparison persists. Because her murder already contained the elements that make a case feel like a predator at work: calculated entry, staging, and a victim who seemed targeted in a way robbery can't explain. If Georgette's killer was a stranger passing through Los Angeles, the war provided perfect cover. If he was someone who lived nearby, the city's size and churn provided the same. Either way, time did what time always does in unsolved murders. It erased the edges. Witnesses aged. Memories blurred. Leads that might have been powerful in the first 48 hours became stories, and then rumors, and then footnotes. But the physical details remain stubborn, and they matter. The door opened in the morning, the water running upstairs, the light bulb unscrewed to create darkness at the entrance, the violent assault confirmed by autopsy, the unusual bandage associated with her death, the missing car, later abandoned. All of it suggests intention, and intention suggests a person who made choices, not a random accident, not a misunderstanding, not a tragedy without agency. Someone entered that apartment or was already inside it. Someone made sure the doorway would be dark. Someone assaulted Georgette, fought with her, and killed her. And someone left behind a scene that, whether meant to look like a drowning or meant simply to confuse, did exactly what it needed to do. It blurred the truth just enough to survive the decades. Although no one was ever formally charged with Georgette's murder, one name that occasionally surfaces in later discussions of the case is Walter Keenan, a U.S. Marine who was stationed in Southern California at the time. In 1945, he was arrested in connection with the killing of another young woman, Evelyn Winters, in San Diego. That case involved sexual assault and strangulation, grim similarities to Georgette's death the year before. Because of those parallels, some writers have suggested Keenan as a possible figure worth examining, but the historical record is cautious. There is no clear primary source documentation showing that authorities formally considered him a suspect in Georgette's murder. No witness placed him at the El Palacio apartments. No physical evidence tied him to the bathroom where her body was found. His name persists not because of proven connection, but because of resemblance, the unsettling echo of one violent crime against another, separated by miles and by unanswered questions. Beyond Keenan were the quieter, less defined figures. Men Georgette may have known socially, acquaintances from evenings out, individuals who could have been admitted voluntarily into her apartment because there were no clear signs of forced entry. Detectives examined her address book, traced recent companions, and weighed the likelihood that the killer exploited familiarity rather than brute intrusion. Yet none of those leads hardened into charges, and so what remains is not a solved case, but a narrowing corridor of probabilities, a suspect with parallels but no proof, and a circle of acquaintances with opportunity but no evidence. From that corridor, we step into the silence, the place where answers should be, but aren't. Georgette Bauerdorf has often been treated as a shadow alongside other, louder Hollywood mysteries. But her case deserves to stand on its own, because it isn't just a story about glamour and tragedy. It's a story about how easily violence can hide inside a beautiful place and how quickly an answer can slip away when a city is moving too fast to look back. Somewhere, in news archives and old police files, her name still exists in ink, a case that never closed, and a question that never stopped being asked. Who killed Georgette Bauerdorf? Thank you for listening to today's episode of Echoes of the Unknown. If you found this story compelling, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with fellow mystery lovers. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, the truth sometimes has a way of echoing long after the lights have gone out.